When you give someone your whole life, you don't expect them to put you away like clutter that's outlived its use. I didn't see it coming, not from my own son. I thought I was building him a home, a future, a family. Turns out I was building a stage for my own erasure. But if I was quiet when I gave it all, I'd be even quieter when I took it back. I still remember the day I handed Daniel the keys. The house was small but brand new, with wide windows that faced the morning sun and kitchen cabinets I picked out myself. I had poured everything into that place, my retirement funds, my emergency savings, even the last little life insurance check from Richard. God rest his soul. It was never meant to be an investment. It was a gift, a mother's final big gesture. It's yours. I'd said that day, placing the keys in his hand. His eyes went wide, and for a moment, I saw that boy again, the one who used to curl up in my lap during thunderstorms, whispering, "I'm safe with you." "Right, Mom." I smiled through the lump in my throat. "Start your new life here. Raise your kids. Make it your home." Jenna had cried. She hugged me like she meant it. "You didn't have to do this, Carol," she said. "You'll always have a room here, okay?" And I believed her. That's the part that stings the most. How much I believed them. I didn't just hand over a house. I painted the nursery while they were at work. I cooked meals, cleaned, sewed curtains. I canceled a road trip with my old college friends to babysit their toddler when the nanny canceled. I put in the effort to make the place feel like a home because I thought it would always feel like ours. But slowly, the signs crept in like cracks in drywall. Jenna started calling less. Daniel stopped coming by to check on me. They stopped asking if I wanted to come to Sunday dinner. Then the room that was always mine became Jenna's yoga room. The framed family photo on the hallway table. Gone. Replaced by a minimalist vase and nothing else. Still, I made excuses for them. They're just busy. Kids these days need space. I shouldn't cling. I even justified the financial changes. Daniel had asked me to streamline things, merge our accounts, let Jenna handle the digital banking. It'll make tax season easier. "Mom," he'd said with a smile, "you don't want to deal with that nonsense anymore." I nodded. "Sure, honey. If it helps," and it did help for them, but I wasn't suspicious. I didn't have the energy for suspicion. I had spent a lifetime trusting, loving, giving. I had never been the kind of woman to ask for receipts. Back when Richard passed, Daniel had just started college. I worked part-time at the elementary school during the day and part-time at a diner 3 nights a week just to keep him in school. I remember ironing uniforms at midnight and crying quietly in the laundry room so Daniel wouldn't see. And now he drove a Tesla and told me I needed to trust the system. I didn't want a reward. I didn't want praise. I just wanted to know I hadn't been forgotten. Some nights, I would sit alone in my small rental and scroll through old messages. My name in Daniel's phone had once been Mama Bear. Now it was just Carol, a contact like any other. That's how mothers disappear. You know, not with a scream, but with a silence that settles between the lines of a text message. I remember the last holiday we all spent together, Thanksgiving 2 years ago. I had brought my old apple pie recipe, the one Daniel used to beg me to make every fall. I watched him take a bite, pause, and then reach for Jenna's store-bought pumpkin tart instead. "Too sweet," he muttered, and didn't even look up. That moment shouldn't have hurt, but it did, because it wasn't about pie. It was about slowly being erased from the life you helped build. First your photos come down, then your recipes. Then your voice stops mattering in conversations. Then one day, they look at you like a piece of old furniture that doesn't match the new decor. But I stayed kind. I stayed helpful. I stayed quiet. Because mothers are supposed to, right? We raise, we sacrifice, we give until there's nothing left to give, and we do it with grace. But there's a difference between grace and erasure. And that line, it was blurring faster than I ever expected. So when the message came, short, sharp, and sterile, it wasn't the words that cut deepest. "Hey, Mom, about the cruise, we're thinking it should just be immediate family this time. Hope you understand." It wasn't just that I wasn't invited. It was how I was uninvited. How neatly, how officially, how completely. That's when I knew. Not only was I not part of their family plans anymore, I wasn't even part of the picture. They had taken everything I gave and built a wall to keep me out. And that was when something in me cracked. Not with fury, but with clarity. You see, this isn't your typical revenge story. There won't be shouting matches or broken dishes, no courtroom drama or loud confrontations. This would be the kind of revenge that comes from remembering who you were before they taught you to shrink. It starts now, with silence, with stillness, and with a woman who just remembered how powerful she really is. I read that message 3 times. Just immediate family. The words stared back at me like they'd been plucked straight from some stranger's cold script. But it was Daniel who wrote it, my son, my only child. The same boy I used to rock to sleep when his nightmares came too strong. The boy who once held my hand so tightly at the school gate that I had to pretend my fingers didn't ache. And now he was writing me out of his life in a single sentence. We think it's best if it's just family this time. Hope you understand. Hope I understand. I stared at my phone, the room around me dim and quiet except for the refrigerator's hum and the soft tick of the wall clock. I read the text again, searching for a trace of warmth. A clue that maybe it was Jenna's idea. Maybe he didn't mean it. Maybe there was a second message coming to say, "Just kidding, Mom. Of course you're coming." But nothing came. The cruise had been my suggestion, not to tag along or be a burden, but to celebrate Daniel's promotion. I had offered to cover part of the expenses, even help with the kids. I imagined us on the deck together, sipping tea, watching the ocean. Instead, I got 4 words that shattered me. Just immediate family. Mom. My knees felt weak. I sat at the kitchen table and set the phone down gently, like it might explode. I didn't cry right away. Not because I wasn't hurt. God, I was, but because the pain didn't know how to come out yet. I glanced around the room. Everything in that kitchen had a memory. The blue-tiled backsplash I'd saved up for, the lemon curtains I'd sewn, one spring after Jenna said yellow made the house feel warmer. The old oak table, passed down from my mother. And in that moment, every single thing in that room whispered the same question. If you're not family anymore, what was all this for? The next message came half an hour later. Jenna this time. "Carol, I hope this isn't hurtful. It's just easier with a smaller group. Hope you understand." Easier for who? Easier to pretend I don't exist. Easier to enjoy the house I gave without having to include the woman who gave it. I didn't reply. Not to either of them. I didn't trust what I might say. Instead, I sat still in the silence and let it wash over me. It didn't feel like peace. It felt like drowning. I hadn't seen it clearly until now. The missed calls. The postponed visits. The room that used to be mine becoming a storage space. The way Daniel's voice changed when I'd ask if I could stop by unannounced. Tight. Polite. Distant. They'd been erasing me in slow motion. I just hadn't wanted to watch. A few days later, I was sitting in the park across from the house I once gave them. Leaves rustled overhead, and children's laughter floated through the air like music from a life I no longer belonged to. Eileen sat beside me, arms crossed, eyes sharp behind her reading glasses. "He planned this," she said. No hesitation. "Daniel's not stupid. You raised a smart man. He knew exactly how this would land." I stayed quiet. "You think Jenna pushed him?" she asked gently. "Maybe, but let's be honest here. Daniel knew what he was doing. He's been slowly untangling himself from you for years." I flinched. "I know it hurts," she added. "But you've got to see it for what it is. You gave until there was nothing left to give. You let him believe that you'd never draw a line, that you'd just keep nodding and smiling and baking pies no matter how cold he got." I stared down at my hands that once packed his school lunches, hands that rubbed Vicks on his chest during flu season, hands that held his head when his father died. And now, those hands were shaking, not from age, but from something far colder, clarity. "You need to check your accounts," Eileen said, her voice tightening. "Seriously, you gave them so much. You need to make sure there's something left for you." I opened my mouth to object, but she held up a hand. Don't defend him right now. Don't justify anything. Just protect yourself. Please. She leaned in, softer now. You've always said you didn't want a revenge story, Carol, that you're not that kind of woman. But this isn't about revenge. This is about respect. And you haven't had any in a long time. That hit something deep in me because it was true. They didn't hate me. They just didn't value me. And that, in some ways, felt even worse. Later that night, I sat on the edge of my bed, staring at the dim glow of my bedside lamp. I could hear the quiet tick of the clock again. Same as before, but something inside me had shifted. Not rage, not yet, but a steady, building quiet. The kind that comes before a storm, not the kind you see in movies, but the one you survive in silence. I reached for the folder where I kept old documents, bank access papers, the deed to the house, medical proxies. I flipped through each page slowly, reading every line like I was reading someone else's life. That's when I realized Daniel had control of far more than I remembered giving. He had access, authority, power, and I didn't even know what he was planning to do with it. The cruise wasn't about relaxation. It was an opportunity, a window, a way to move me quietly into the background without resistance. The denial wasn't the end. It was the beginning. The first clear sign that they didn't just want space, they wanted me gone. And let me ask you something. If your own child slowly removed you from the life you built for them, would you keep waiting for them to see your worth? Or would you finally start protecting it yourself? I turned off the light, but I didn't sleep because for the first time in years, I wasn't dreaming of family. I was remembering who I was before I gave it all away. And I wasn't going to let them finish writing me out of the story, not without a chapter of my own. The silence was unbearable. Not the comforting kind that comes with peace. This was the kind that wrapped around your chest and squeezed. The kind that made you forget how to breathe. I sat alone in my living room. The soft hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen, the only sound left to compete with my thoughts. Sunlight streamed through the window, casting golden strips across the hardwood floors I had helped install. Barefoot in old jeans, sanding and sealing while Daniel and Jenna were too busy with work. I looked around that room and felt like a ghost in a house I once built with love. The framed photos on the mantel weren't mine anymore. They weren't for me. I wasn't in any of them. There was a family in those pictures. Yes, but I wasn't part of it. Not anymore. It was Eileen who insisted I check the accounts. I didn't want to. Some part of me still wanted to believe this was all just a misunderstanding. But deep down, I think I already knew. That old gut instinct that only mothers have. It had been sounding the alarm for years. I just kept hitting snooze. I opened my laptop slowly, fingers stiff with tension. My hands trembled as I typed in my login. The dashboard blinked to life. At first, everything looked normal. Groceries, utility bills, a few Amazon orders. Then I dug deeper. Dozens of small transfers, each labeled innocently. Maintenance, home upgrade, service fee, but I hadn't approved any of them. I hadn't even known they were happening. Then came the bigger ones. Design deposit, contractor prep, thousands. Drained, drip by drip. I clicked into the linked accounts. There it was. Daniel's name, Jenna's card, both listed under secondary users. I blinked at the screen. My ears began to ring. They weren't just spending my money. They were managing it. They'd been in control for God knows how long, moving pieces behind my back while smiling into my face. I sat back in my chair, my breath shallow, my heart pounding against my ribs. It wasn't even the money that broke me. It was the clarity. They didn't think I'd notice. They didn't think I was watching. Because in their eyes, I wasn't really there anymore. I stared at my phone for hours before calling my financial advisor. I didn't want to raise alarm. I just needed confirmation. Just checking in. I said lightly, wanted to make sure everything still aligned with the plan we set up last year. Mr. Harlan was kind, steady-voiced. But the pause in his response told me everything. Well, he said slowly, there have been some recent movements, design expenses, home upgrades, a second-party fund allocation. Who approved those? I asked. There was another pause. Then, your authorized representative. Ma'am? Amanda Holloway. I went still. Cold. But I never... You signed a durable power of attorney last spring, he said gently. She's listed as the acting party in case of emergency. Emergency. They had created the emergency. I remember it now. Daniel handing me a folder at the kitchen table. Just routine paperwork. Mom, you're not getting any younger. Jenna brought a notary. Super quick, no stress. I signed it without reading. Because I trusted him. Because he was my son. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Daniel smile. That same easy grin he used when he was 7 and trying to hide that he broke a window playing baseball. Only now it wasn't charming. It was calculating. I got up and walked through the house like a stranger. I touched the walls I painted. The chairs I reupholstered. I opened drawers and found receipts, groceries I hadn't eaten, appliances I hadn't chosen. I had funded a life I wasn't even part of. But the worst came the next morning. A knock on the door. A white envelope slid beneath it. On the front, a sticky note in Jenna's handwriting. Just sign when you're ready. Carol, this'll make everything smoother while we're gone. I didn't open it right away. I sat down at the table, stared at the envelope for nearly an hour. Then I peeled it open. Inside were typed documents, polished and official looking. At first glance, harmless. Estate updates, tax prep language. Nothing seemed threatening. Until I read closely. Irrevocable power of attorney, full medical and financial control. Authority to place me in long-term care should my condition require it. My condition. My hands gripped the paper. They weren't waiting for me to get sick. They were preparing to make decisions for me, to move me out, sign me over, manage me like a leftover file. And the cruise, that wasn't just a family trip. It was the perfect time to file things while I wasn't there to ask questions. I sat in that kitchen for a long time. I didn't cry. I couldn't. There was nothing left to cry out. I picked up the photo from the mantel, one of Daniel holding his newborn, smiling like he had the world in his hands. I had taken that photo. I had framed it. I turned it over. On the back, I'd written in tiny letters, "You'll always be my baby, no matter what." I read that line over and over. Then I slowly placed the photo in a drawer and closed it. Because now I knew. He didn't see me as a mother anymore. He saw me as a problem to solve. And that kind of loss, the kind where you're still alive, but they've already written you off, that kind of loss is the cruelest of all. The next morning, I didn't make coffee. I just sat at the kitchen table, staring at that envelope. The one Jenna had slipped under my door like it was nothing, just another little task for me to handle while they were gone. But it wasn't just another envelope. It was the final piece of the puzzle. The moment the picture came into focus, they weren't waiting for me to fade. They were editing me out in real time. Jenna's neat handwriting on that sticky note said, "This'll make everything smoother." What she really meant was, "This'll make removing you easier." And Daniel, he was silent through it all. That silence, it wasn't neutral. It was permission. I called Eileen before I could talk myself out of it. "I need a lawyer," I said, skipping the small talk. There was a pause. Then her voice came through the line, clear and steady. "I'll pick you up in an hour." The law office sat on the corner of 4th and Mason. I'd driven past it 100 times and never once thought I'd walk in there for myself. Mr. Clayton had been our family's estate attorney for years. He helped Richard and me draft our first will, handled the transfer of our old house. Back then, we had been a team, me and Richard, side by side, planning for a future we never quite got to finish. Now I walked in alone, but not uncertain. He looked up from his desk, surprised. "Carol, everything all right?" I nodded politely and sat down, setting the envelope on his desk. "I need your help, and I need you to be fast." He opened the papers, scanning the contents, his face hardening line by line. "Where did this come from?" "My daughter-in-law," I said flatly. "While she and my son are on a cruise I paid for." He leaned back in his chair, sighing through his nose. "Carol, if you had signed this..." "I didn't," I said sharply, "and I won't." He nodded once. Then we have work to do. That afternoon became a quiet storm. No yelling, no chaos, just swift, deliberate action. Clayton reviewed every document I had ever signed: banking authorizations, property transfers, power of attorney forms. He had his assistant start pulling transaction histories. He flagged anything suspicious, anything with Jenna's or Daniel's name on it. We moved through it all with calm precision. I felt like I was sitting in the middle of a control room, watching years of blind trust unravel into timelines, signatures, dollar amounts. "Would you like to initiate reversal proceedings for the house deed?" he asked. I didn't hesitate. Yes. And freeze access to all joint accounts. Yes. Remove Daniel and Jenna as authorized representatives. Yes to all of it, I said. My voice steady now. And I want you to document everything they've done under my name. Every transaction, every transfer, every false claim. He gave a small nod of approval. "We'll prepare the affidavits and notify your financial institutions. You may also want to consider hiring a private investigator. If they've already started building a paper trail, we'll need one of our own." The words landed like bricks, but I didn't flinch. "Do it," I said. By sunset, I was back in my car, parked outside the house I no longer called home. The porch lights were off. The mailbox was full. A sprinkler ticked quietly in the yard. I didn't go inside. I didn't need to. That house wasn't mine anymore. Not emotionally, not spiritually, not in the ways that mattered. But legally, it was about to be mine again. Later that night, I sat in my little rental apartment, a cup of tea warming my hands. My laptop blinked open on the coffee table. The screen displayed a growing list of flagged items from Clayton's office: unauthorized transfers, estate documents amended without consultation, loan applications filed using my property as collateral, line after line, proof after proof, not of hatred, but of entitlement. They didn't do this because they despised me. They did it because they thought they could, because I made it easy, because I loved them too much to imagine they'd take that love and use it like a key to my undoing. But love without respect, that's not love, it's a leash. I pulled out an old photo album from the box I'd kept under the bed. There was Daniel, age 8, with chocolate frosting on his nose. Daniel at graduation, eyes bright with promise. Daniel on his wedding day, hugging me with his whole heart. And now, he couldn't even say, "I'm sorry," because in his mind, he hadn't done anything wrong. He was just being practical, just managing things. That's what scared me most. He didn't think it was betrayal. He thought it was responsibility. I closed the album and whispered to the quiet room, "No more. Not no more love. I'll always love him. That part's unshakable. But no more blind surrender. No more handing over everything I am in the hope of being wanted. I won't beg for a seat at a table I built." That night, I slept for the first time in days. Not because things were fixed. They weren't. But because I had finally stopped pretending. I knew now that I wasn't crazy. I wasn't dramatic. I had been quietly erased. And now I was writing myself back in. I didn't tell anyone I was leaving the house. Not Daniel. Not Jenna. Not the neighbors who had waved to me for years and never once noticed how lonely I looked behind those curtains. I just packed one suitcase, 2 framed photographs, and a box of documents from Mr. Clayton's office. And then I walked out, not in anger, not in fear, just done. The air outside felt different that morning, lighter somehow, like the world hadn't changed at all. But I had. I didn't look back as I closed the front door for the last time. That house was built with love. Yes, but it had been turned into something else, a transaction, a strategy, an illusion. I locked the door, slid the key through the mail slot, and walked to the curb where a taxi was waiting. "Where to, ma'am?" the driver asked. "Someplace small," I said. "And mine?" "Out." The apartment was modest. 1 bedroom, a small balcony. No mortgage, no memory-laced walls, just mine. It came furnished, which suited me fine. I didn't bring any of the furniture from Daniel's house. I didn't need reminders of all the times I let myself believe I still belonged. What I brought instead were essentials. The two photos. One of Richard and me on our wedding day, grinning like kids, and one of Daniel, age 4, wrapped in a beach towel, giggling on the shore of Lake Michigan. Back when loving me didn't require reminders, I placed them side by side on the windowsill. One represented the life I built with someone who loved me. The other, the love I gave without conditions, even when none came back. And I wasn't erasing either. I was just reorganizing the story. And Mr. Clayton moved quickly. Within days, the house reversal had been processed. The joint bank accounts were frozen. Daniel and Jenna were removed from every authorization they had manipulated their way into. The new deed was clean. And the house, already sold, quietly, cash buyer. No inspections, closed within 48 hours of the reversal. The money now sat in a new account, one with only my name on it, tucked away like a secret. Clayton smiled when he told me, "They won't even realize it's gone until they try to use it." I nodded. I didn't feel triumph. I didn't feel revenge, just relief. A long, slow breath of finally. For days, I walked through my new neighborhood like a woman relearning how to breathe. There was a small park around the corner, with wooden benches beneath an old oak tree. Every morning, I sat there with a coffee and let the stillness sink in. I wasn't hiding. I was healing. One morning, a little girl ran past me, chasing a paper airplane. Her mother laughed from a few steps behind, calling her name. For a moment, I smiled without hesitation. No past, no regret, just a moment that didn't hurt. That's how I knew I was getting better, because joy no longer felt like betrayal. The day the cruise ship docked, I was sitting on my balcony with a book in one hand and a cup of tea in the other. I imagined Daniel and Jenna dragging their suitcases through the airport, sun-kissed and tired, already planning next steps in their quiet takeover. They had no idea they were coming home to strangers in their house. They didn't know the locks were changed. The walls were bare. The title had shifted. And they didn't even get to say goodbye to the illusion they had built for themselves. That afternoon, I got a text. "Daniel, Mom, what's going on? There are people in the house. Jenna's freaking out. Please call me." I didn't respond, not out of cruelty, but because I had nothing left to explain. My silence was no longer a weakness. It was my boundary. A few minutes later, another message came through. "I don't understand how you could do this. This isn't you." I stared at those words for a long time, and then I whispered, "No, this is me. You just never bothered to see her." At sunset, I pulled out the photo of Daniel from the windowsill, the one with the beach towel. I held it in my hands for a while, long enough to remember the little boy, but not long enough to miss the man. Then I folded it gently, slid it into an envelope, and placed it in the back of the drawer. Not thrown away, not destroyed, just no longer center stage. They say rebirth is loud, messy, dramatic, but mine wasn't. It was quiet. It was a woman sitting on a bench in the park, learning how to drink coffee without checking her phone for a child who doesn't call. It was switching off the news and turning on jazz again. It was walking past mirrors and no longer wincing at who looked back. Mess. You don't need applause to reclaim your life. You just need to decide that you're still the one living it. And when the dust settles, when those who took advantage start to feel the cold of your absence, they'll call it betrayal. But it isn't. It's protection. And it's overdue. I parked a block away, not to hide, but to watch. The sky was beginning to shift, sunset bleeding orange over the rooftops, like the day itself was trying to soften what was about to happen. I stood behind the tree across from the house. My house, at least. It had been once. Now it belonged to a young couple with bright eyes and no idea of the ghosts that had once lived inside those walls. They were on the porch, talking with the realtor, laughing. Fresh start. Clean slate. Daniel and Jenna pulled up a moment later. Rental car. Suitcases. Sunburns. They looked relaxed. Lighter. Vacationed. Jenna had on a wide-brimmed hat and white linen pants, like she was still somewhere tropical. Then they saw the cars in the driveway. Then the strangers. Then the sold sign. Daniel blinked like he didn't understand what he was seeing. Jenna's jaw clenched. I could see it from where I stood. She stormed toward the porch. Daniel followed, fumbling for his phone. That's when I crossed the street. Slow, calm, present. Daniel's head turned first. He froze. "Mom," he said, his voice a strange mix of relief and panic. Jenna turned too, eyes narrowing. "What is this?" she snapped. "Who are those people? Why is our house—" "It's not your house," I said, my voice steady. Not anymore. Daniel stepped toward me, brows furrowed. "What are you talking about? What's going on?" I handed him the envelope I'd brought. Thick, neat, every page carefully ordered. "These are the only explanations you need." He opened it and started reading. His fingers trembled. Page after page. House reversal, transaction logs, revoked authorizations, and a full legal record of everything they thought they'd done in secret. Jenna snatched it halfway through, her face tightening as she scanned the evidence. Her lips moved, whispering dates. Her fingers fumbled toward her phone. "This won't hold," she said. "We have rights. You can't just—" I cut in gently. "You gambled with my trust, and you lost." She flinched, like she'd been slapped. Daniel finally looked up, pale and quiet. "Mom," he whispered. "We never meant—" I raised my hand. "Don't," I said. "You didn't mean to get caught." His shoulders sank. Jenna looked from me to him, furious. "Are you going to let her do this? She's your mother." For God's sake, Daniel said nothing. And in that silence, I saw the truth. He didn't know what to say, because part of him still believed I'd forgive it all. Again, that I'd cave, like always. He didn't realize yet that this wasn't punishment. It was release. I wasn't here to shame them. I wasn't here to get even. I was here to let go. I turned toward the car. "Wait," Daniel called after me. "Please don't walk away. Not like this." I stopped at the curb, then glanced back once, not at him, but at the house. "Don't worry," I said. "You've already walked away. I just finally caught up." And with that, I left. No yelling. No final blow. Just truth and distance. Back in my apartment, I placed my keys on the table and sat in the evening light. I didn't cry. Not from joy. Not from sadness. Just stillness. The good kind. The kind that lives inside you after you've made peace with what's gone and finally start tending to what's left. Later that week, a letter arrived. No return address. Inside, a handwritten note from Daniel. I didn't see it happening. I thought I was protecting you by handling things. I thought I was being responsible. I was wrong. I'm sorry. I miss you. I hope one day you'll come back. I placed the note gently into a drawer. Not in anger, not with hope, just there, with the other pieces of what used to be. I didn't need to return it. Some things don't need answers. Some things are complete just by being acknowledged. A week later, I walked past the park near my new place. There was a little boy on a tricycle, his father behind him, holding on tight. "Go ahead. I've got you," the man said gently. And something about those words broke me open and healed me all at once. Because I used to say them to Daniel, "I've got you." And I did, for decades. But now, I've got me. If you've ever given someone everything, your time, your love, your strength, only to be pushed aside when they thought you had nothing left to offer, I want you to know you're not invisible. You're not weak. And it is never too late to take yourself back, because sometimes the quietest endings hold the loudest truths. And walking away, that's not failure. It's power.